here with Joe Danza. Joe is the founder and CEO of Simplified Real Estate Investments, LLC, with over 14 years of experience and ownership of multiple real estate companies along the East Coast. Growing up in his parents' real estate business, he saw firsthand the benefits of real estate and knew it could provide generational wealth if done correctly. Currently, Joe is an IT program manager for the Navy, living in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. Without further ado, welcome to the show, Joe.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, we're really excited to have you on. We're looking forward to the show. It looks like you've got quite a few things going on over there, all while managing to work W-2 income. And so I'm really excited to see exactly how you're keeping all these balls in the air, so to speak. But before we get into that, if you could share just a little bit more about yourself and also how you got started in real estate, that'd be great.
Yeah. So I got started in real estate in the worst time. The market had just crashed in 2008. And I had taken all of my money that I had in my bank accounts, ran up my credit cards, borrowed from my parents, who were my first investors, and invested in real estate. And I grew up on real estate. This is what my parents did. So they were excited that, I took the bug and I ran with it. And, so, here I am 15 years later. We're still going strong, and we're continuing to grow. Even in the high markets, we're still investing, and you can still be profitable in these markets, which a lot of folks have steered away from.
Yeah, that's an interesting background to start in a really tough time. 2008, the market had collapsed. There was so many different things that was taking place within the market, and you managed to jump in and achieve some success. So that's really good. Now, what led you towards real estate? I know you said you was brought up just basically off of the questionnaire that you filled out when we were scheduling the show. Was it simply because you grew up in a real estate family, or what was pulling you towards real estate?
Yeah, I think it was, I work a full-time job, and I had been passed up for promotions. And I realized how quickly, when I got replaced and passed up for these promotions, how quickly I could be replaced. And so I knew it was time to figure out something. Like, if I was working this hard for somebody, it was time to put all that energy into a business that would generate money for me, that could replace my W-2 income, which it has. And I own it. I benefit from all of it. I'm not benefiting somebody else, on a weekly basis.
Okay, and so you saw the writing on the wall. You knew that you were really expendable because you were putting in the time, you were putting in the effort, but you weren't being rewarded. And so you knew that at the drop of a hat, you could be just taken off of the payroll list and given a pink slip. So you also mentioned that you have created enough passive income now to replace your income. What's keeping you on the job? Just curious.
Yeah, no, I get asked that a lot. And I consider these the years for growth, right? So the longer I work, the more I can grow faster, the more I can control more of the assets myself, the fewer partnerships that I have to form, right? So you use a partnership to jump into real estate to propel, but how many people are actually owning their own deals? And that's kind of my focus. Is like, I want to own my own deals and I want to control them. And so partnerships allow you to, jump into real estate, but how do you stay in that deal long-term wise? Like, what is the goal with a partnership? And by being on a lot of solo ventures, you're able to stay in, you're able to make the calls, you're able to make the decisions. So I use my W-2 income right now to basically help propel or accelerate the growth of the company. Like, we're not having to generate more payroll than necessary. I'm the only one in my company that doesn't get paid. And we're able to use that money to go out and buy more assets.
Yeah, I love that mindset that you're interested in trying to eliminate the partnerships. And in the beginning, like you mentioned, when you're trying to get the business off the ground, you do have to use those partnerships to leverage to get into the game because you don't have the experience. A lot of times you don't have the capital. And so connecting with a person that has where you're weak at it helps you to be able to get a foot in the door. And so I love that mentality that you have there. If I could, I'd love to discover and just uncover some of the things that has worked for you along the way. And so it sounds like you have created a really good system to be able to achieve significant success. So you operate a property management company that you own, you syndicate, you also have short-term rentals. How have you been able to do all this while working a full-time job?
It's not easy. I have a good team, right? So I hire a lot of smart people. I'm not afraid of hiring smart people. A lot of people want to be the smartest person in the room. I would prefer to be the dumbest person in the room. And then I hire for trustworthiness as well. So those are my two drivers. You don't have to know real estate, but you do need to be smart and you need to be trustworthy. And we always bring in extra people that, are consultants that help guide us, who make recommendations for us. So, I've brought those people in. They allow me to go work a full-time job, but they run the business on a day-to-day basis. Like, am I still communicating with my team throughout the day? Absolutely. We've got tools and processes in place where I wake up in the morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, after my workout. I have a list of things to do from my team, whether they're from the stateside or the offshore team. We've got tons and tons of activity going on, and I always have a queue of things that I'm working on. And then I've also put the processes in place where folks can go out on my team and handle the tasks that I don't want to do. I'm not writing every single person. My team is writing every single person for me. I may be reviewing some of it, but the majority of it is the communication that comes out. It's my team that's handling it. I have some really good folks on my team that help me manage everything that's going on a daily basis. And I empower them to do their jobs. So that's kind of like what we've done, processes and systems that are in place, and then really empowering the team to do the work that needs to get done.
Hiring and delegating your partners and leveraging other people's time, it sounds like, has been the key to your success. Was that always like that, even in the beginning when you was first deciding that you were going to jump in back in 2008? Did you come through the gate with employees or with this mentality that you were going to hire people out? Or did you first get started by learning the process yourself and then just educating your employee of exactly what it was that you were looking for?
Yeah, no, in the very beginning, very humbling beginnings, you do everything yourself. You are running your spreadsheets. You are doing the construction. I mean, I did the construction in the very beginning. And you do everything yourself. And part of it is you want control of everything. And as you grow, you realize you cannot have control of everything. And you have to learn what is the stuff that can slip, what is the stuff that can't slip. And then you've got to also remember the perspective of that what you don't get done today will get done tomorrow. Nobody died. And so that's kind of the mentality that I have that allows us to grow. There are days where I cringe, where something didn't go well, but I realize at the end of the day, we will be okay. It's not the way I wanted it done, but it has met the mail. The decision has been done. It's been executed. There's nothing I can do about it. And you just have to let go. But yeah, in the very beginning, it was a one-man show. But as I grew, I learned I had to delegate and I had to expand a team in order to handle this, because you just can't do it all by yourself. That's the reality of it.
You're right. If you're looking to scale, you're going to have to delegate. You're going to have to leverage other people's time in order to build things out. And just a one-man band is just not going to get things to the next level there. So good for you. It sounds like you created a great strategy, a great system in which you've been able to scale things out. So if we could bring things up to more current events, share with our audience a little bit of exactly what it looks like for you within your business on a day-to-day basis. I've chatted with you a little bit before we actually went live, and you mentioned that you have some short-term rentals. You've also got some long-term rentals. You've got some property that you actually own in New York. You're doing syndications. Just kind of touch on a little bit of that, and also mention briefly what your experience has been within those New York investments.
Let's talk about the ugly pig first. So New York, it's very controversial right now about investing in New York. I invested in New York 15 years ago. So these properties are, they were my very first properties. They were failed flips. They became burrs. They've made me a ton of money over the years. And it's a market that's just challenging. It's a tenant friendly, and in market, it's not landlord friendly. It's hard, right? And you are, doing a lot of due diligence before you put a tenant into a property. You are doing background checks. You are doing a ton of screening questions. You are Googling them. My team does that for me. And so that's how we stay in that market. We have $700 a door. We bought at a very, very good time. The property values have doubled. And they're just good. They're buy and holds. And that's kind of our business model, is a buy and hold. So that's how we stay in New York. Are we actively investing in New York? Not really, not until things change. Things go in cycles. I'm sure New York will balance itself out, but for right now, it's just a market I don't want to touch. We do syndications. We invest in different markets. The apartment buildings, there are 140 unit doors. It's a lot. It's a lot to juggle at times with those, because there's so many moving parts, but we have property managers in place that help us do day-to-day operations. We have our general partner team that helps us as we sit down on a weekly basis to figure out the things that need to get done and the things that, can be done over time. And so we're constantly prioritizing, shifting, priorities based on what's going on at the buildings. And so it could be focusing on occupancy. It could be focusing on bad debt. It could be a couple different things. And we're in the Carolinas and we're in Maryland in those properties. We do short-term rentals, and, people, the apartment syndicators, and I'm one of them, they will beat up on the short-term rental folks telling us that, hey, they're not real investments. But I hate to break it to you. The short-term rentals, they generate a lot of money and they make more than most syndication deals. Nobody talks about that, but between the equity that you accrue, the cash flow, if you bought right, you can make a lot more off a short-term rental than you can off a syndication. And I'm proof of that. Like, our doors clear a significant amount of money, and we don't have a lot of short-term rentals. So, we buy in these destination markets for these short-term rentals. We're on the coastline. So we have, there are destinations that everybody wants to go to. We have high occupancy, we have low cost, and we're really focused on making sure that these properties stay profitable. So, they're great markets. And I think, as I tell everybody with real estate, time heals everything. So if you buy high, you hold. If you buy low, you hold too, because you'll make your money up on all of this. And it's like you get into trouble in real estate when you are selling at the most inopportune time, where your back is up against the wall. And so part of our business model is we don't sell, and we make sure we carry enough cash. We're able to make informed decisions, and we're never forced to do something that we're not prepared to do. Like, it's always multiple exit strategies we have in place, but more importantly, we are always cash heavy to take care of the different cycles that we encounter. Just like we're in a cycle right now with high interest rates, things are slumping. All asset classes of real estate are suffering, whether it's retail, apartment buildings. It just depends on your market. And you never want to be in that spot where your back is up against the wall and being forced to make a decision that's not in your business plan.
Joe, I'm in 100% agreement with you. Everyone within real estate investing is feeling a pinch at some point. The interest rates are making things a little bit more challenging, and sellers, they're coming off of a bull market in which so many people were throwing so much capital at these deals that they're having a difficult time coming down on their pricing. But the numbers just aren't working with the interest rates going as high as they have. So I love the strategy. I love the model that you guys are using. You're looking for opportunity at this point between short-term rentals and then the syndication models. Was there anything that jumped out that really led you to going into different niches within real estate investing? It sounds like you're in short term, you've got some long term, and you're also syndicating. A lot of people, they try to stay in one niche instead of looking in different sectors for opportunities. What led you to that?
Yeah, it's all about diversification. You know, I believe in diversification in different markets. I believe in diversifying in different cycles, right? So some properties we bought very inexpensively, others we bought very high. Um, it works. The numbers work. We always buy for the numbers. We jumped into these different asset classes because it's all about diversifying. So like retail has suffered, but apartment buildings have done really well historically. We knew that as the market cycles go through, everybody needs a place to live. Um, so it's all about diversification. Like we know short-term rentals, very high demand during certain seasons, low demand in the off seasons. We know that it's disposable income for short-term rentals. So our short-term rentals have been very, very good the last 5 years. But will they always be that strong? We don't know. And so this is why diversifying is so important. We notice like with some of our apartment buildings, the South, they perform very well. The North, it's a little bit more challenging. It just depends on your local market. And that's why we're not in all in one market, because there's different cycles. Everything is cyclical and not everything applies across the board. So I believe in diversification. Other operators will tell you I'm crazy and you're missing out on opportunities, but that's why I hire people to go look at the opportunities for us. Like I have an underwriter on my team who looks at opportunities on a weekly basis, and we meet and we go through all of it. And that's how we continue to grow in this market. It's like we're constantly looking for those value add strategies that supposedly are non-existent, but they really are there. You just got to dig. And it takes a lot of time. And sometimes you got to circle back to the deal multiple times before it actually makes sense.
Yeah. Diversifying, I'm with you 100%. I think it's absolutely essential. And the stock market has shown us that, and Wall Street has shown us that when you diversify, you can spread out your risk. And it's the exact same thing within real estate. If you're getting into different asset classes, into different markets, it spreads out the risk there as well. So I think you guys are doing an absolute great job, Joe. If we could share with our audience a recent transaction, a deal that you've completed, how you located it, how you were able to fund it, how the business plan has been executed, and maybe some hiccups along the way. We're always trying to get a little bit better. And as we put our heads together with other operators that come on the show, we're trying to put tools in our toolboxes and learn a little bit about each other, and also see if we can implement some of the strategies within our own business. So with that being said, if you could share a recent transaction, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, let's talk short-term rentals. Like they're sexy. Everybody likes a vacation. I like vacationing at them. They're a lot of fun, in my opinion. So one of them we did earlier this year, it was in one of the buildings we had previously been in. We own several in the building. It was an off-market deal. It was through a relationship. Did we pay a lot for it? Yeah, we paid, I think it was like $180,000 more than the last time we had purchased. But the numbers still made sense at that price point. We still make a lot of money off that property. We funded it through the cash flow that we had from the other properties. It's nice to be able to fund a down payment, to fund the renovations all through the cash that you've generated from your existing portfolio. Of course, we're securing debt. The interest rates are higher. Obviously, it costs a little bit more to borrow on the money, but we're working with lenders where we're putting strategies together, whether it makes sense to buy down points, whether it makes sense to stretch out a loan or to do a shorter term loan, do interest only. There's different ways to do it. And it's so important not only to to have that deal flow of off-market transactions, but it's also important to have a good relationship with lenders. It's important to know how can you put the right debt on the property, because the last thing you want to do is put the wrong debt on the property and then the property doesn't cash flow. So even in this market with 8, 9, 10% interest rates, we're able to make a property cash flow. I think that property alone on one door does $50,000 on one door alone. It's a really pretty good margin after profit. After you pay all of your expenses and bills, it's a $50,000 margin. Where can you make that today? That is most people's W-2 income right there, and you own it 100%. So it's one of those things that I'm all about, familiarity in markets, diversifying relationships, working with lenders, making sure all the right pieces are in place, and then having multiple exit strategies, right? So it's like, what would I do with this if it doesn't work anymore? Like, am I going to sell it? Am I going to long-term rent it? Am I going to refinance the property into a lower interest rate at a later date? All of those things are factored into when we're underwriting and going through a deal.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And the reason I said that is because whenever I hear short-term rentals, the first thought that crosses my mind is regulations. What do you do if the regulations decide to say that you guys just can't operate short-term rentals anymore? I know there's a workaround. There's a lot of people moving. There's a lot of people moving towards medium-term rentals, and I'm not really familiar with that process, and it seems like the demand just wouldn't be there for that many people to want to fill that occupancy for 30, 60, and 90 days. So that's a concern for me. What are you guys doing to safeguard yourselves around those issues?
Absolutely. It's a concern for all short-term rentals right now. And so what we do is we're buying in destination markets where the cities rely heavily on the taxes that they get from the short-term rentals. And so a lot of those markets don't touch the short-term rentals. They don't touch the regulations for those reasons, because the city lives and breathes off that income that they charge the owners and the operators. So that's one way that we mitigate it. The other way we mitigate it is, do we sell? Can we turn it into a long-term rental? And all the properties that we purchase, if we need to, we can turn them into long-term rentals if the regulation changes. But we go through, we make sure that it's zoned from the day we purchase to make sure that it is in a area that allows short-term rentals. We just don't buy illegal, short-term rentals. When you're dropping $500,000 to $1 million on a property, you've got to buy in the right areas, zone correctly. You got to do your research. Midterm rentals can be very lucrative. We operate midterm rentals as well, and they're very lucrative. They're great for the suburbs. They're great for cities like Baltimore or Dallas or Austin, where there are some restrictions on short-term rentals, and the numbers can work. But again, it goes back to your acquisition costs, your expenses to operate, all that good stuff. So it's possible. It's just, did you do the math, and did it all pencil out correctly? And most people, when I sit and look at somebody's deal, they're missing a couple exit strategies. They're just focused on the primary.
You also mentioned about having great relationships with lenders. So how do you go about doing that? And are these lenders like interested in all asset classes, all states that you're operating within or looking within? How do you go about sourcing a great relationship with lenders?
Yeah, no, you do it before, right? Before the deal comes through, you're having those conversations early. So there are certain lenders I go for the apartment buildings. There are certain lenders I go to for hotels and construction loans. There are certain lenders that I just focus on short-term rentals. It just depends on the lender and where they're lending. So it's having those conversations early enough to know, can they do a loan in this market? What are their requirements to do the loan? Do you have to have, when you do these big, commercial properties, do you have to have, like a KP on the deal? All those things need to be had. Those conversations need to be had first before you actually go after the deal, because most people won't take you seriously if you don't have financing in place. You don't want to be behind the Powerball trying to secure financing after you've put a property under contract. And when you're doing the commercial buildings, it takes money to put them under contract. It's not like you call a realtor where it doesn't cost you anything. You are hiring an attorney to put a PSA together for you. And that takes money and time to put together. And so you want to be able to close that loan and not put that money at risk, because once you spend it, it's considered at-risk capital at that point.
Yeah. So I know firsthand about being behind the 8 ball on putting a property on the contract and then having to go after lending. I'm going through that currently, and it is a painstaking task. But I am learning a lot. I'm learning to get out ahead of things, like you're saying, Joe, and have those warm relationships with lenders that are already primed. They already know exactly what I'm into. And so it wouldn't be a huge challenge to get them going on a transaction rather than trying to locate some really good lenders after you go into contract. So great information. So was there any issues that occurred with this property that you guys closed on with this short-term rental? Was there anything that were challenges along the way? What's some of the things that jumps out to you?
Yeah, we did multiple transactions at one time. We had probably 3 or 4 properties we were closing on at the same time. We had different banks, we had different sellers. It was just making sure the money was in the right accounts, explaining to underwriters what we were doing, showing the liquidity of the company that could handle this much debt. We took on millions and millions and millions of dollars of debt earlier this year, and we were able to walk it through because we had a relationship with lenders. They knew we were experienced operators. They saw our portfolio. They saw our rent rolls. They saw everything behind the scenes that we could handle. And that's how we closed on multiple deals, all within a couple of weeks. It was probably within 60 days. We closed on, I think it was like 4 or 5 properties we closed on. It was fast, and I was writing checks like I didn't, I couldn't believe I was writing that much money for. But no, it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, great job on that. And that goes to show if you do have the relationships in place, you can pull off some significant things in which you guys just accomplished. So, Joe, we're going to go a little bit further into the show. We've got a portion of the show that we like to call our Moonlight Coaching Round. And typically what we do is ask a few questions. If you could hold your response to between 1 to 2 minutes per question, that'd be great. The first question I have for you is, what do you think every new real estate investor should know before investing in real estate syndications?
So knowing that you're not going to make the biggest bang for the buck off a syndication, right? So you're investing in those deals, you're going to make steady returns, but you're not getting rich off the syndication. You are investing as one investor of many, depending on how big the deal is. So don't think you're getting rich off a syndication. They are great to do, but you're not getting rich off that. And that's the number one conversation I have with all of my investors is you're not getting rich off this. It's to help you grow your income.
Yeah, that was actually a surprise for me because I'm a newer syndicator, and it's advertised amongst a lot of thought leaders that when you have 100 doors or 200 doors, 300 doors, that you're just striking a gold mine. What I didn't understand is that a lot of times with the pref, you don't receive a ton of cash flow on them deals. You get your fee up front and you get paid on the back end, but the cash flow in between, a lot of times that's going to the actual LPs. And so that was actually a shocker for me. But yeah, I mean, it's still a great model. It's still a great strategy to get you into the game and get you to a place of where you can achieve some significant wealth. So it's definitely still a great strategy. The next question I have for you is, knowing what you know now, what kind of advice would you give a person attempting to get where you are within their real estate journey about balancing business and life?
So the advice I would give is give yourself grace. When you're doing both, you're not going to do well at a lot of things. And it may be your personal life that takes the trade-off. It may be your career that takes the trade-off, or your business that takes the trade-off. Me personally, my business has always been my priority because it's been the last $50,000 that I had when I started out in the very beginning. I was not willing to lose that money. Other things in my life, I was willing to lose that. So you got to give yourself some grace. You got to prioritize what's really important. It may not be going out with the guys on Wednesday night, spending $300 on beers and food. That may not be the best use of your money. You might be working that night if you own your own business.
Yeah. The next question, if a person had minimal amounts of time, no money or experience, but they wanted to start a business like yours, what steps would you recommend for them to take to start and scale a real estate business?
So I would say educate yourself, get familiar with what asset class that you're wanting to get into, mitigate the risk. Make sure you know how, because things can happen. Shit happens. And then take the plunge. Don't sit there on the sidelines. Like, that's the number one thing I see with all beginner investors is they educate themselves and that's where they stop. They don't, or they skip, mitigate the risk, and they jump into it and they didn't plan for the landmines that hit them. And then it becomes a bad experience. This is why I say a coach is good. I coach a lot of folks on it. I tell folks, don't invest your last $50,000. It's from personal experience. It's not a good place to be in. Invest the money that you're willing to lose. So again, it's always about educating, mitigating risk, and then you take the plunge. But do it with somebody that knows what they're doing.
Yeah. You always want to go with a coach if you can afford one. And I'm with you. You don't want to invest your last. You want to invest what you can lose and not be too impacted by. But yeah, no one ever wants to lose anything, but you definitely don't want to lose your last. So the final question I have for you, Joe, is what are the best reasons to invest in real estate as a passive investor?
So I don't think anything is in real estate is passive, right? Everything is active to a degree. Whether you are the LP investing in a syndication, it is your job to do the due diligence on that underwriting and follow up with that GP team. Like, I like it hearing from my LP investors that I want to know how the deal is doing. What do you think is going well? What don't you think is going, or what could be improved? I want to hear from those LPs. That's not passive. You have to be involved to protect your money and to grow your money. And so it's really playing that active role in real estate, making sure you are hitting the returns. Like, if you're handing your property off to a property manager, it's not, I'll talk to you at the end of the month. It's like, did rent come in? Did we have expenses? What were those expenses? You need to dig into things to understand what's in your business. You will never be profitable by handing it just off to anybody. You've got to ask the questions. You've got to be engaged. So when people say it's passive, I tell them nothing in real estate is passive. If it were all passive, we would all be rich. But it's not the case. There's tons and tons of people who've lost money because they thought real estate was passive. And those are the ones who have had a bad experience because they thought it was passive.
Yeah, you definitely want to manage the manager and make sure that the business plan is going to be implemented, because it's one thing to purchase the property, but then you move into operations and you want to make sure that that property management company is actually doing what it is that they say or that you paid them to do. And that's what's going to help you be able to preserve your investors' capital. And so you definitely got to manage the managers, in which is not passive. But yeah, great answers to each one of those questions. Before we wrap up, we always like to have our guests share a great personal development book or either a great business book. Do you have any recommendations for the audience?
I would say Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I know everybody recommends it. It's a really good book, easy read. If you can understand those principles, it will be mind-changing. And you got to put them into practice. But it's a very simple book. I read it a couple times a year. It's just a good to refresh off if you've read it once before.
Yeah, I think I'm overdue. I've read it a couple of times. I passed it down to my kids to read, and they've actually read it themselves. But it is one of those required readings that a person should intake every now and again. So, hey, Joe, great answers to each one of those questions. Great book recommendation. Thanks for sharing all those details about your beginnings and how you're doing so much while working a W-2 and having a full-time job. That's absolutely astounding, the success and the amount of things that you're accomplishing while holding this job. If someone wanted to reach out to you and connect, do you have a preferred method?
Yeah, just reach out to us on simplifiedrei.com, and you can shoot us an email, schedule a time. That's the best way to reach out to us. You can also reach out to us on Facebook as well.
Okay, great. Joe, once again, thanks for coming on to the show. You provided significant value. We'd love to have you back anytime.
Thanks so much for having me.